Hello humans, we are your nerd theorists, and with the release of 40k 10th edition merely weeks away, Games Workshop have given us a sneaky peek at the new terrain rules. So we thought, why not bang out some videos? In this one we'll be talking about the rules, and then we'll do a spotlight on the 6 new terrain types, on how to use them in battle, but more importantly, how to build your own. Welcome to 10th edition terrain. Now before we talk about the terrain itself, we need to cover cover. The rules for cover have changed ever so slightly. If you are granted cover by a piece of terrain, you get +1 on your saving throw. But if your saving throw is a +3 or better, and the weapon shooting at you has a 0 armor penetration, cover doesn't grant you the +1. You only get the +1 if the armor penetration on the weapon shooting at you is a -1 or worse, or greater, depending which way you're looking at it, and your armour is a +3 or more. If you've got a +3 or better and the armour penetration is 0, cover means nothing. So the simplified terrain is now 6 types. There are 6 types of terrain, that's 5, there are 6 types of terrain for Warhammer 40k 10th edition, and all of your terrain will fall into one of those 6 categories. And there are rules for each of those 6 categories. It makes it a hell of a lot easier. It also makes it easier to make your own terrain, because all you need to do is look at them and think, right, the piece I'm going to make is going to fall into this category or that category. Now the 6 pieces, and I've written them down because I will forget them, there are 6 types of terrain. Craters and rubble. Now these are things that a model can stand in. So a crater or rubble. Barricades and fuel pipes. This will also encompass low walls, fences, anything sort of yay high to a space marine. Then we have battlefield debris. Now, not to be confused with rubble even, rubber double. Battlefield debris is something that your model can't finish its move on. So, upturned oil canister of some sort, or a big statue, or anything that your model can't stand on. Rubble is a larger piece that your models can finish their move on, whereas debris isn't. It's a small piece or a big piece, but it hasn't got a flat surface that you can plonk your models on at the end. Hills and sealed structures. Now, sealed structure basically means something that your models can't get in. No open doorways, no windows. It is basically like a boxy unit. Like a landing pad or something like that, and any hills, anything that gives your models a way of getting above the enemy. Next is woods, self-explanatory, and then lastly is ruins. Now each one of these 6 has their own rules, and we will go through all of them now. We'll talk about the rules, and then in the following videos we will have one video for each type of terrain where we'll go into real depth of explaining how it works, and we'll also do a few tutorials on how to make your own. So, firstly, crates and rubble. The rules for this one are simple. Models not holy models, not like the Emperor's Finest, holy, like a hole, like a bum hole, but not a bum hole. You know what I mean? Models that are completely on top of this terrain get cover. It doesn't matter if there's a line of sight. If you can finish your move on top of a crater, on top of some rubble, you've got cover. Regardless, if you can get down and look, it doesn't matter. They've got cover. That's the end of it. Some of these rules, it's about line of sight, but with craters and rubble, it's not. If you're on it, you've got cover, which is a +1. Look back at the beginning of the video. Next up is barricades and fuel pipes, and walls and fences and low, get behind it, take cover, which you would expect to be cover. It's a little bit more complicated though. So, models that are wholly within 3 inches get cover if you can't get a line of sight from every model of the attacking unit. So if you've got 5 Space Marines and they're attacking a troop of Tyranids, and the Tyranids on the opposite side of this barricade, get down, have a look, and you have to look from each one of the models. If one of those models can't draw a line of sight, they've got cover. and they have to be 3 inches. So as long as they're 3 inches within it, on the opposite side, you've got to get right down, have a look. So it's not just a universal, like the craters and rubble were. You have to have line of sight. If you don't have line of sight from every model, so you can't say, oh, well, this model's got line of sight, that one will attack, but the rest of the whole unit has to have line of sight. Also, there are charging rules when it comes to barricades. Now, normally, if you are charging, you have to end your charge within 1 inch of the enemy. But if the enemy is within 1 inch of terrain on the opposite side, so if they're behind the barricade within 1 inch of it, you can still charge them as long as you can finish your charge as close to the terrain as possible and within 2 inches of the enemy. So instead of it being 1 inch, you're basically giving yourself space that you can still charge in, and you can reach over and give them a smack. There are also classes for the fight phase. The fight phase, you can attack from the other side of the barricade as long as you're 2 inches from the enemy. So it's basically just giving you that extra inch, which ladies will tell you it makes all the difference. Not that I know any ladies that play Warhammer. Anyway, next, BD, which I don't know what that stands for. Battlefield debris. Battlefield debris is anything your model can't stand on, basically, like we've explained. And instead of being on it or around it, you have to be behind it, obviously. And again, any model not fully visible from all models in the attacking unit has cover. So exactly the same, get down, have a shifty, and you have to be able to draw a line of sight from every one of the models in that unit to be able to fire. Otherwise, they've got cover. Nice, easy one. Hills and sealed structures. Now, this is a good one because this is... you could give the opposition cover if you don't use these pieces of terrain cleverly. Enemy units not fully visible because of the terrain have cover. So basically, you could be a long way away from this cover, but behind it, and it still blocks line of sight. So there's cover straight away. But obviously, if you can't see them, they can't see you. So it works both ways. The problem with hills and sealed structures is you can obviously get on top of them. Now, if you're on top of a sealed structure and you're firing down, you may not be able to see the enemy because of the corner of the unit if you're up here. So it's a tricky one because you're granting yourself cover and granting the enemy cover at the same time. It's going to be an interesting one to use. I'm going to have a play with it and we'll see what happens and we'll come back to it. Woods. I think this is the same as before, but I'm not 100% sure. Any model fully inside the wood or viewed through it by an enemy that isn't in the woods has cover. So if your unit is in the woods and the enemy unit is not in the woods, even if they can draw a line of sight, it doesn't matter, you've got cover. You're in the woods, you've got cover. If you're on one side of the woods and they're on the other side of the woods, and I think that's a viewed through it by an enemy not in the woods. Yeah, so if you're looking through it, also cover. But that goes both ways, obviously. If you're outside of it, if you're both outside of it, both have cover. That rule doesn't apply to aircraft or units with the towering keyword. So if it's a massive, great big Gargant, Gorkamorky, Gorkatron, whatever they're called, Morkatrons, Godzilla, EV Towering, Thunder Megazord, or aircraft, Jimbo, that plane from DuckTales. Anyway, so aircraft or towering, it doesn't matter. They're above, they can do what they want. Models wholly within the woods can see out as normal. So if you're in the woods and the enemy's outside, you can fire on them as much as you want and it doesn't make a blind bit of difference, but you have cover when they're shooting at you, even if they've got line of sight, if you're within in the woods. And lastly, ruins. Now I've left this one till last because this one has a completely new rule that's been invented for 10th edition. Firstly, ruins completely block line of sight for all units except aircraft and towering. So even if it's one of these gothic ruins with big windows and you can still see the enemy through the window, it doesn't matter. If you're on either side of it, it blocks line of sight, end of. Models outside of the structure can shoot in, and models inside can shoot out. But models wholly within get cover. Models not fully visible to all attacking units get cover. So that's a little bit confusing because it does say the footprint completely blocks view. But what that means is, if your boys are inside the ruin and the enemy are outside, the boys inside get cover. Regardless, they get cover because they're in and they're out. If they then come in, and it's a series of ruin walls and whatnot, that's when the not fully visible rule comes in. So if you're both within the confines of this terrain, you have to be fully visible. If you're not, you get cover. But again, you're both going to get cover, so you need to move. So that's a bit confusing, but this is the exciting bit. There's a new rule called plunging fire. If your models are wholly within the structure and 6 inches above ground level, so this is a ruin that's got a second floor basically. If your models are wholly within the structure and 6 inches above ground level and are attacking a unit where all of the models are at ground level, you add 1 to your armor penetration. So if you're firing down on the enemy, all of those models have to be on ground level, all of your models have to be at least 6 inches off the ground. You get -1 to your armor penetration, which is +1, if you see what I mean. So you get extra armor penetration. Now, it only mentions this rule for ruins. I would assume that this plunging fire rule, for being 6 inches above, would include hills and sealed structures, if they are 6 inches above the ground. It's one that I'm sure they will cover at some point, but it hasn't been mentioned in these rules. There also hasn't been any mention of garrisoning. Anyway, the old defence rule, the old defending a structure rule, that's not been mentioned. This might cover everything. It is a lot simpler. It's a lot easier to understand. And once we have a play with it, we'll get a better idea. But this is basically almost exactly what Games Workshop have said, just my version of it. But I haven't changed anything. This is what they say. I've just made notes. And you'll probably see from the nice little images that Dave's popped up on screen. It's their official gumph. So, that's the rules. If you've got any comments, and if you know that I've buggered something up there, please let me know. Because, you know, I'm new to this. We're all going to be new to this. No one's going to know what's happening. Don't matter if you've got 30 years of experience. It's new. It's new. Next up, we will be doing a spotlight on craters and rubble. And I'm going to show you how to make some, which is fun. So thanks for watching. I hope this wasn't too rambly. I don't often do videos where it's all talking, and if you could see the amount of outtakes, you'd know why. Thanks for watching. My name's Gaz. Please like and subscribe. I'm off for a Parmo.